The hazardous intent to make him lose his footing and plunge down the spiral staircase fades instantly as Mei stares at him in sheer, unadulterated surprise. Closing his dark eyes, Subaru can't help but let out a quiet grumble at the situation. It was a terrifying turn of events he had fully predicted, yet doubted halfway through his own deductions. Deep down, a wave of profound relief washes over him. He is incredibly glad that by leveraging the rule-breaking power of return by death, he was successfully able to prevent this violent tragedy from igniting in this timeline.
It is the ultimate, chilling proof that this young girl had indeed been the hidden monster who ruthlessly pushed his back into the abyss twice in his past lives. To think that the invisible criminal who had cast him into his doom and who had been brutally strangled to death by the very hands of Natsuki Subaru in a previous loop was Mei Portroot. Mei blinks away her initial shock, her cherry-colored lips immediately loosening into a sweet, saccharine smile. Her delicate fingers trace along Subaru's arm, which is firmly locked around her torso to keep her anchored to solid ground. Facing the boy, she takes a careful step backward, intentionally creating a small pocket of distance between them and the drop of the spiral staircase. With a soft, mocking chuckle, she notes that your mind must have lost a lot of other essential stuff alongside your memories if you're standing here saying such strange things. She playfully shrugs off his accusation, teasing that a massive misunderstanding can only happen under the cover of amnesia. Subaru narrows his eyes, his voice flat. Misunderstanding? Mei rolls her eyes, tilting her head with an innocent pout. She asks if it isn't completely obvious, insisting that the very idea of her trying to murder Oni-san is nothing but a terrible, ridiculous misunderstanding. Inching backward with a perfectly composed front, her dignified, unyielding approach completely catches Subaru off guard. It is a chilling display that goes far beyond his expectations. In his past lives, he truly believed he would never be able to avoid this fatal pitfall. Mei smiles softly, telling him there is absolutely no need to harbor such dark suspicions. She reasons that if she genuinely wanted to take Oni-san's life, the treacherous sand dunes outside would have offered a million perfect opportunities to hide a corpse, rather than a confined watchtower. She dryly adds that since Oni-san doesn't remember a single thing about their journey, he probably wouldn't know any better. Subaru nods, conceding the point. He admits it's a weird contradiction. If she had harbored a desire to kill him from the very beginning of their expedition, she would have had countless flawless chances to execute the deed without a single witness. Yet, she actively chose to keep him alive. Mei beams, clapping her hands together. Don't you agree? Then Subaru cuts through her cheerful front, his voice dropping into a serious note. But the matter of your motivation to kill me sprouting and aggressively growing since this morning is a completely separate issue. Am I correct to assume that this sudden urge is a direct, violent chain reaction to whatever happened between us last night? The words hit Mei like a physical blow. The saccharine smile instantly vanishes from her face, her lips tightly sealing as she lets out a heavy, deflated sigh. Shrugging her shoulders with a bitter, unfavorable attitude that completely defies her childlike appearance, she glares at him. With a deeply displeased tone, she breathlessly asks if she has been completely trapped into an awkward, cornered situation. Subaru doesn't move. What do you mean by an awkward situation? Mei scoffs, pointing an accusing finger at him. She demands to know if this was his grand strategy all along, lying about his memory loss to act as a trap, deliberately waiting to see if she would attempt to push him off the edge. She furiously accuses him of creating a twisted experiment to systematically eliminate any obstacles on his side and test her usefulness to the tower, calling this the perfect opportunity to catch her red-handed. The young girl desperately tries to reaffirm the authenticity of her defense,
her chest tightening with pure frustration at her sudden disadvantage. Up to this point in the loop, she had displayed absolutely zero open malice toward the group, but Subaru holds the undeniable data of his previous deaths. Even if she stands there denying the crime, the physical evidence of what she is capable of cannot be altered. Yet, as Subaru looks at her frantic, trembling frame, a clear, undeniable truth solidifies in his mind. Mei sharpens her lips, masking her panic behind a defensive sneer.
She breathlessly asks what he expects her to do now that everything has come this far, wondering if she should just start violently resisting and run away from the tower. She notes that since her dangerous animal companions aren't nearby to hold her back, she is entirely capable of escaping from Onisan's grasp on her own. Subaru shakes his head, his voice soft but firm. Don't get me wrong, Mei. My memory loss isn't a cheap trick designed to deceive you or catch you in a lie. It is the absolute truth.
That is precisely why I am being dead serious with you, just like a human being should be. Mei bites her lip, admitting that she had genuinely doubted whether his amnesia was a total fake. She fixes her gaze on him, demanding to know what Onisan is ultimately trying to accomplish by trapping her here, asking if he expects her to just blindly believe his words, simply because he isn't violently retaliating against her. Subaru's breath sharply hitches in his throat. The young girl slowly places her hands around her own slender neck, sticking out her tongue in a chilling, deliberate gesture. The sight sends Subaru's heart rate into an absolute dangerous spiral. But ironically enough, the sudden panic isn't a mystical reaction to Mei remembering her own death in a past life. It is a visceral, psychological reminder of the raw trauma of strangulation. Armed with that conviction, the young assassin uses the physical gesture to deal a serious emotional blow straight to Subaru's heart. But Subaru refuses to let her weaponize his fear. Mei casually notes that she doesn't recommend using execution methods that take a long time to finish the job, dryly boasting that she possesses plenty of lethal skills that don't require much suffering, mocking Onisan for being entirely pathetic at hiding his cards. Subaru looks her dead in the eye, his voice unwavering. I have absolutely no intention of killing or hurting you. Even after this moment, tomorrow, and for every single day onward, whatever crisis awaits us, I intend to treat you with the exact same kindness I have shown you until now. Mei freezes, her expression completely fracturing into pure, unadulterated dismay. Huh? This shift in her behavior is entirely different from her usual, calculated adaptation to danger. Her face is painted with a profound, hollow confusion, looking up at Subaru with eyes that fundamentally cannot comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. Under her stunned gaze, Subaru offers a calm, reassuring nod. Subaru explains that since her crime was successfully intercepted beforehand, they can simply choose to keep the entire incident an absolute secret between them, ensuring everything remains perfectly fine. He tells her that even if she goes back to the drawing board to plot his murder through some different, elaborate method, he will simply dedicate himself to preventing that attempt as well. He sighs, admitting that while the endless cycle of deception undeniably leaves a bitter, terrible taste in his mouth, he refuses to give up on her. Mei stammers, her voice shivering as she draws her shoulders back. What are you even saying? Subaru presses forward, asking her if she finally understands the reality of her situation. He points out that attempting to strike him carries an incredibly massive risk to her own survival. He begs her to abandon her hostility, telling her that if she still harbors doubts or dissatisfaction, they can sit down and talk like human beings, promising to listen to every single grievance she has. Mei murmurs quietly, her entire body trembling as she repeats the word, dissatisfied. Suddenly, her lips sharpen, and she screams directly into his face, shouting that the only thing that is truly dissatisfying and impossible to believe is the sheer absurdity of this entire situation.
Subaru had poured his heart out to persuade her into making a rational, peaceful choice, but Meili looks at him as if he is an absolute madman. She frantically repeats that she can't believe it, her hands busily and mindlessly toying with her long braid. To Subaru's observant eyes, the physical habit is a clear, psychological sign of mental self-defense, a subconscious manifestation of her intense dependence on a certain person who shared that exact same hairstyle. Meili screams through her frustration, shouting that Oni-san has absolutely no idea what she was truly trying to accomplish by murdering him. Her words are completely frantic, her desperate attitude unnaturally intense. It is Subaru's very first time witnessing Meili this violently disturbed in the flesh, though the truth was, he had already seen this raw, broken side of her once before, locked inside the memories of her Book of the Dead. He analyzes her panic. After whatever hidden event transpired last night, Meili had encountered Subaru inside the library of Taijida, and after an unknown conversation with the alternate Natsuki Subaru, she had made a frantic, rushed decision to murder his amnesiac self. But a crime executed in such a chaotic hurry was a double-edged sword that would have inevitably ruined her. Even if she had successfully pushed Subaru into the void of the staircase without any immediate witnesses, how could a captive assassin expect to escape the lethal allegations of murder once his corpse was discovered? Trying to cover up a fall from a massive stone staircase as a simple accident would have been an impossible stretch. Subaru understands the group's dynamic perfectly now.
He knows for a fact that if he had died, Amelia, Beatrice, Ram, and the others would never have let his death slide by without systematically tearing the tower apart to uncover the truth. Meili's crime would have been brought to light within minutes. Warriors like Ram, Julius, and Echidna possessed a brilliant intellect that far surpassed Subaru's own. They would have seen through her clumsy cover-up instantly. It was impossible to believe Meili hadn't calculated that risk. Which meant one undeniable thing. Subaru looks down at her compassionately. This wasn't a master plan, Meili. This was nothing but a desperate, frantic urge. You have been trained to view murder as your only mechanical solution to solving problems, completely blind to any other option. That isn't your fault. Meili gnashes her teeth, her eyes wide with fury as she stiffens her body as if she has just been doused in freezing water. Don't stand there talking like you understand a single thing about my life. What does Oni-san, what could you possibly know about me? Subaru stares straight into her eyes, his voice absolute. I do know. Meili stands entirely paralyzed. Subaru shrugs his shoulders, delivering a statement that intensifies her terror. Meili, I know who you are. I know it sounds incredibly creepy, but I might actually understand more about the darkness inside your soul than the only other two living people in this world who know your secrets. Hearing his declaration, Meili's anxiety skyrockets. Subaru knows the truth is absolute, but as he searches for a way to convey it without scaring her further, he actively fights against a twisted surge of self-love burning in the back of his chest. He can still hear the never-ending temptation of his alternate self echoing through his mind, that whispering voice that always appears before an action, trying to tempt him into solving his crises through the cowardice of murder. By consuming her soul in the previous timeline, the phantom ghost of the dead Meili portroute and her violent temptations had returned to haunt his conscience. Subaru vigorously shakes his head, banishing the intrusive thought. No, that's not it. He forces himself to look past the ghost and analyze the living girl standing before his eyes. Looking closely at her frustration and utter confusion, he contrasts her with the memories he harvested from the library. Based on everything Meili had suffered through in her life, It was entirely wrong to claim she was a mindless, naturally murderous creature. The girl standing in front of him right now was fundamentally different from the tragic version locked inside the Book of the Dead. His soft heart feels a certain conviction about that fact. After all, if she were a pure monster, the phantom version of her voice would have manifested to mock him. To put it in a straightforward manner, Subaru had literally lived through her entire life experience by reading her soul. He understood her daily mindset, her coping mechanisms, and her habits. She had never been an entity that ended human lives without a sense of fairness or a logical reason. There was an unquestionable, echoing emptiness carved in Maylee's heart, and her brutal upbringing had exponentially increased the raw fear ruling her choices. But deep within her soul, a single name still glimmered with light. Subaru whispers the name into the quiet corridor. Elsa Granhired. Maylee violently flinches, her breath catching. Subaru locks his gaze onto her. That woman is the exact reason why you tried to kill me today, isn't it? The question causes Maylee's face to distort with pure, unadulterated bitterness. It is the volatile rage of a child having the single most sensitive, protected wound in her heart brutally prodded and trampled upon. But Subaru forces himself to press the issue, relying on an old family philosophy. He notes with a faint smirk that while a normal person removes their shoes before entering a house, rudely walking straight into another person's heart with your shoes firmly on is the golden rule of the Natsuki household. Armed with that resolve, Subaru forces his way directly into the hidden chambers of the young assassin's heart. He recalls the black-clad murderer from his consumed memories, a woman he had never personally known, yet felt intimately familiar with. Merely thinking about her triggers a complex, intense vortex of emotions inside Maylee's soul, a mixture of deep relief, profound longing, intense sadness, lingering rage, and absolute emptiness. Her feelings for the assassin were incredibly complicated, yet beautifully simple. Maylee deeply longed for Elsa, loved her with all her heart, and entirely admired her existence. And because that light had been violently stolen from her life, she had been cast into an abyss of despair, suffering, hatred, wrath, and total despondency. Every single second she had spent accompanying Subaru and the others on this journey wasn't a calculated move for revenge. Her unskilled, clumsy self wasn't capable of such a grand deception. In truth, Maylee Portroot was just an incredibly clumsy, despairing young girl, entirely ignorant of her own emotions and blind to the true depth of the emotional scar carved into her heart. She was a professional killer who had been forced to adapt to a monstrous environment. Subaru looks at her softly. Did you want to take revenge for her sake? Maylee lowers her head, her voice a shaking whisper. I don't know. Even so, Elsa was. Subaru begins. Maylee violently shakes her head from side to side, interrupting him as she cries out that she has no such grand wish, stating she is fully aware of the futility of her actions. Subaru understands her pain perfectly, and Maylee recognizes that his words are coming from a place of genuine comprehension. In this heavy silence, the two of them stand as absolute equals. Trapped in a dark, suffocating chamber of grief without a single correct answer, the only way she knew how to express her internal chaos was to fall back on her training and resort to murder. The hatred she harbored while remaining trapped in her isolated world left her with no other visible path. Yet, despite her violence, her intense desperation for Elsa's presence refused to reach its end. To Maylee, the assassin had been a brilliant, shining light, but that light was far too dazzling and dangerous for an ordinary human to ever safely follow. Subaru steps closer, his voice gentle. I know you are holding back an immense amount of pain inside your chest, but the answers you are desperately looking for can never be found at the bottom of a staircase. That is precisely why I am asking you to stop." He looks at her with absolute sincerity. "Leave the weight of this tower to me. I won't make things worse for you. At the very least, I will work with everything I have to ensure reality doesn't deteriorate any further. If you can just bring yourself to believe that." But no matter how forcefully Subaru pleads his case, Meili keeps her face tightly hidden behind her hands, refusing to offer even a single slight agreement. Her resistance is completely natural. Subaru is asking her to adopt a peaceful way of life that has never existed in her world. On the other side of the equation stands Natsuki Subaru, a guy who will proudly preach his morality without flinching a single millimeter. He knows that if a senior ever invited him to a confrontation with full preparation only to completely bash his worldview, even he would be surprised by how much the rejection would sting. Therefore, because he fully anticipated her refusal, he had already prepared a flawless countermeasure. Subaru scratches his head, giving a self-deprecating smile. He tells her he will reflect on the fact that his words can't be trusted, admitting with a laugh that based on his reputation up until yesterday, he was already notoriously terrible at keeping promises. Meili looks up through her fingers, her voice tense. "That's why—" "What?" Subaru grins. "That's why, instead of a fragile promise forged between just you and me, let's forge an absolute promise between you and us." Meili furrows her brow in total confusion, entirely unaware of his true intentions. But the answer to her doubts materializes out of the shadows a single second later. It's perfectly fine. I was carefully listening from the shadows, acting as an official witness to this promise." Meili's shoulders violently shiver at the sound of the voice, but she forces her muscles to compose themselves. Stepping out into the light is an outstanding, magnificent beauty whose radiant presence cannot be doubted. Meili's emerald eyes widen completely, her lips quivering in sheer shock. "Wane-san, you heard everything?" Meili stammers. Amelia steps forward, her long silver hair fluttering like the glitter of pure moon. Standing before them like a figure stepped straight out of a beautiful myth, she explains that Subaru explicitly instructed her to hide nearby and watch over the conversation, commanding her to step in and stop Meili only if the girl attempted to do something dangerous. Hearing her explanation, Meili rotates her neck in absolute astonishment, looking between the two. "If I did something dangerous, he told you to watch me, not Oni-san?" Amelia smiles gently, turning her amethyst eyes toward the boy. "Yeah, if Meili did something dangerous." "Well, is everything taken care of now, Subaru?" Subaru nervously averts his gaze, a bright blush painting his cheeks. "Yeah, that's right. It's just, the setup made me a bit anxious." Amelia tilts her neck in confusion. "Why are you suddenly turning your face away from me? Did something happen, Subaru?" "No, it's just, you're just entirely too cute to look at directly," Subaru whispers into his collar, his throat trembling with intense embarrassment. As Amelia tilts her neck even further, Subaru forces his embarrassment aside, locking his absolute focus back onto the perplexed young girl. Because he had completely foreseen her ambush, he was entirely confident in his ability to stop her crime in this timeline. The true variable he had to calculate was the terrifying presence of his alternate personality, Natsuki Subaru. He notes that in the timeline where his alternate self had ruthlessly murdered Meili, the act might have been nothing more than a mechanical response of self-defense against her initial ambush. Once she was stopped, the entity didn't necessarily act against Subaru's core values. Therefore, Subaru determined that the most optimal strategy was to hand the responsibility of her protection over to individuals far stronger than himself. He holds a complete, unyielding faith that even if his consciousness disappears and the monstrous Natsuki Subaru takes control of his flesh, Amelia and his companions will successfully intervene and handle the situation. Amelia steps in closer, bending her weight down until her amethyst eyes are resting at the exact same level as Meili's. She tells the young girl that she completely believes in Subaru's words, adding that if Meili is still too untrusting, she is entirely free to carefully observe his actions from a distance. She promises that if Subaru ever dares to break his word, she will be right there to be angry alongside her. Meili's mind spins in utter confusion, her lips trembling. Observe Oni-san? That's weird. Isn't that completely strange? For me to observe Oni-san and Oni-san? That's...
Amelia offers a warm, logical compromise, explaining that if Meili truly wants to execute a bad deed, she should wait until after Subaru actively fails his word. Until that moment arrives, she should simply watch to see whether he honors his promise or not, asking if that isn't completely fair. The young girl stands paralyzed as her traditional coping mechanisms and violent solutions completely distort and crumble under Amelia's kindness. Subaru scratches his head, stepping into her confusion to lay down a path forward. You were about to make a catastrophic, irreversible mistake today, Meili, but mine and Amelia-chan's nice save managed to prevent the disaster. View this as a prime opportunity to learn how a real human interaction should be handled. This is your chance to discover a different solution to your pain than trying to kill me. It's a bet. Meili blinks up at him through her confusion. A bet? Subaru nods. Settle the toxic, evil feelings inside your chest for a while, and watch to see if you still harbor a desire to murder me down the line, or if your mind changes entirely. In the meantime, I'll do my absolute best to give you plenty of tedious lectures about morality. He knows that from a pragmatic perspective, his intrusive care is entirely unneeded and overstepping boundaries. Meili had a specific, dark way of living that she had followed her entire life, and Subaru is arbitrarily forcing new options into her worldview. But he also understands that if she refuses his hand, her current path will lead to a definitive dead end inside this watchtower. If she relies entirely on her assassin instincts, they will never be able to conquer this trial together. Subaru takes a bold step forward, narrowing the distance between them. I am not letting you get off this train, Meili. I don't know your exact age, but when I was around your size, I relied on the help of the adults around me all the time. Meili's shoulders violently shiver as he approaches. Subaru reaches out, his large palm gently patting the head of the nervous girl as she looks up at him with deep unease levitating in her eyes. He forces his fingers to be gentle. He will never crush her thin neck. He presents this decisively peaceful alternative as a direct challenge to the violent whims of Natsuki Subaru. Meili is a child, and she does not need to die in this tower. Amelia smiles beautifully from behind, wrapping her slender arms around Meili's torso to lock her in a tight, protective embrace. She softly begs the girl to place her trust in Subaru and to trust in them. Meili lets out a faint, stunned gasp as she is rendered completely immobile against Amelia's soft warmth. Amelia rubs her cheek affectionately against the girl's hair, and Meili lightly bites her lip, her defenses entirely dissolving. Amelia whispers softly into her ear, telling her that this isolated sand tower is far too small a place for a young girl to decide something as heavy as her ultimate destiny. Meili stands silent, completely overwhelmed. Amelia gently commands her to leave this prison behind, urging her to step out into a bigger, brighter world and discover her true answers there, promising that they will all work incredibly hard to deliver that future. Preaching morality to a broken child while trapped inside a lethal cage isn't the most elegant strategy, but it is the only way Subaru knows how to speak. With complete, utmost care and a torrent of kind words, the two of them pour their hearts out to the young assassin. Meili looks deeply into their eyes, thoughtfully analyzing the weight of their sincerity. Her voice drops into a soft, vulnerable note. I don't want to completely forget about Elsa. Subaru nods instantly. Ah, that's perfectly fine. There is absolutely no need to force yourself to forget a person you truly loved. It's just that, well... He cuts his own sentence off, his mind unthinkingly drifting back to the terrifying, beautiful black-clad woman he had witnessed inside the Book of the Dead. A bizarre, surreal impression washes over him. He had never met the assassin in his life, yet her silhouette carries a profound sense of familiarity. Reminiscing over her form, Subaru subconsciously strokes his own stomach. Locking his eyes back onto Meili, he delivers his final guiding truth. Even if it's a person you loved with all your soul,
I wish for you to never copy their violent way of doing things. Meili stands powerless, completely stripped of her path forward. A few heavy, silent seconds tick away in the quiet corridor before she slowly, softly nods her head in surrender. The crisis has been averted, and a new fragile bond has been forged.